Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. On today's show, we're talking about the materials cycle. Construction costs are influenced by the cost of raw materials. These commodities vary due to short-term supply-demand fluctuations. Last year, the industry was buzzing about the rising cost of steel due to the trade negotiations with China. A lot of the steel used in U.S. construction is sourced in China these days, and the tariffs on imports meant that Chinese steel would be more expensive. The price of U.S. steel went up to match the higher price of Chinese steel. It seems that every time a major hurricane makes landfall in the U.S., there's a spike in the price of lumber. And these storms create extreme demand for construction materials, especially in the southern states. The ripple effect is felt throughout North America. We saw this after Hurricane Harvey soaked Houston a few years ago. We saw it when Hurricane Laura smashed through Southwest Louisiana last month. I have friends who've been grumbling that prices for plywood have tripled since earlier this year. I even saw 2x4 lumber priced at nearly $8 a stud last week. I've never seen lumber prices priced that high. So I'm going to introduce you to the metric for lumber commodity futures. Lumber commodity prices are measured in U.S. dollars per thousand board feet. Over the past 25 years, these prices have fluctuated in a range between $200 per thousand board feet to $400 per thousand board feet. They've pretty much always been in that range. But as recently as March of this year, prices were below $300. By the 14th of September of this year, prices hit an all-time high of $984 per thousand board feet. By the 16th of the month, prices had fallen nearly $380 to below $600 per thousand board feet. And for the past month, prices have been hovering around $575 per thousand board feet. This figure is still historically high. Lumber futures fell 3% just today in the time it took me to record this podcast episode. So the question is twofold. Number one, what is the right price for planning purposes if you have a new project you're about to undertake? And number two, how do you plan your project to take advantage of the most advantageous pricing? When prices spike, it's because of a short-term supply-demand imbalance. The choke point in the system are the lumber sawmills. There is actually a surplus of trees. The past 3 decades saw more acreage planted than at any time in history. Many of these investments were made by those seeking a recession-resistant investment. See, trees grow at about 15% a year, regardless what's happening in the economy. As many sawmills sought greater efficiency and lower costs over the past decade, many smaller sawmills closed. And the result was a significant reduction in sawmill capacity across the industry. That sawmill capacity was better tuned to the average demand and resulted in better profit margins for the sawmill companies. This reduction in capacity also exposed the industry to greater price volatility for finished products. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. 2020 saw a spike in demand, and the global forest supply chain and increasing number of manufacturers are now operating in an environment where price volatility for the end products, largely the result of panic buying, that's been high, and the cost of capital, that is the cost of holding inventory, is low. So 2 scenarios have developed as the market continues to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic over the last several months. Number one, high demand for toilet paper and paper towel products resulted in empty shelves at many retailers, and the supply chain is still lagging in some areas of the country. There's also strong demand for primary and secondary chips, as well as pulpwood, the raw material for manufacturing paper. That's driven prices higher in some markets. Number two, North American lumber producers have seen surging demand for products as the construction sector aimed to play catch-up after the national lockdowns in the sawmills. A steady supply of raw timber across the South, though, has kept log prices low. And that presents an opportunity for the sawmills to make outsized profit margins. And that's exactly what we've been seeing. So if you're a developer, a rehabber, or a builder who relies upon price stability in order to make your margins, how do you plan your projects? This comes down to an exercise in risk mitigation. If you know you're going to use lumber in the next year, and your cost of borrowing funds is, let's say, 5%, you can store lumber for up to a year for very low cost. If you can get your lumber at a price that meets your budget, you should consider locking in at that price, whether it's by pre-purchasing the materials and storing them yourself, or having a secure agreement in order to get the supplies at that price when you need it. If you fail to do that and you're experiencing high prices now, then waiting a few weeks might be the smartest thing to do. In any industry that's sensitive to commodity prices, you need to pay close attention and manage your supply chain accordingly. Southwest Airlines was the most profitable airline in the U.S. for nearly a decade, simply because they'd done a better job of securing long-term fuel contracts at a better price that made sense for them. As you think about that, put some extra time into managing your commodity supply chain. Have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.